When I was finishing high school and preparing to start college, my parents made it very clear they wouldn't be supporting me financially. They said that now that I was 18, I was on my own, just like they had been at my age. This came as a shock to me because, up until then, they had always been supportive of me. It felt completely out of character. They explained that when they were younger, they had to take care of themselves because their own parents couldn't afford to help them out once they became adults. They believed that this experience made them resilient and independent, and they wanted me to go through the same thing. I was really frustrated by their decision because I had hoped to receive at least some financial assistance for college. My course of study was challenging, and I knew that if I had to work while studying, it could affect my grades. College isn't cheap, and I realized that even working multiple jobs might not be enough to cover all my expenses. So, I proposed taking out a student loan, thinking it would be a reasonable compromise. However, my parents firmly rejected this idea, saying that borrowing money went against their principles. Even when I suggested borrowing from relatives with the intention of paying them back later, they refused, stating that it would be embarrassing and beneath them to ask for such a favor. We argued about this several times, but they wouldn't budge. In the end, I sought help from my grandparents, who agreed to co-sign a student loan for me. That's how I managed to attend college. I felt really hurt and angry with my parents for a long time, but eventually I forgave them, even though I never forgot how they had refused to help me when I needed them most. Years have passed since then, and I am now 34 years old, working as a software developer. I earn a comfortable income, especially compared to the rest of my family. My mom is retired after a career as a music teacher, and my dad still runs a local hardware store. I also have a younger sister, Catherine, who is now 30. However, we haven't spoken in 5 years because of her entitled and spoiled behavior, which my parents have always enabled. Catherine has been this way for as long as I can remember. I tolerated her attitude for many years, but things reached a breaking point 5 years ago when she and her boyfriend came to my Christmas dinner. I had just moved into a new apartment and wanted to do something special for the family. However, during the dinner, Catherine made several unnecessary remarks about how small and outdated my apartment was. She even criticized the neighborhood. Throughout the evening, she kept bragging about her boyfriend's wealth and the size of his estate, which she claimed was 10 times bigger than my place. I had tried to keep my cool, but eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I told her that, unlike her boyfriend, I was paying for my apartment entirely on my own, without any help from our parents. I pointed out that if she had such high standards, she was welcome to leave my apartment and never come back. Catherine and her boyfriend were clearly offended by this, but it was all true, so they left. Since then, Catherine and I have not been in contact. My parents tried for years to get us to reconcile, but I have no interest in mending our relationship. The only reason I had put up with her behavior before was for my parents' sake, but I reached a point where I couldn't do it any longer. Recently, I found out that Catherine is getting married to the same boyfriend she brought to the Christmas dinner 5 years ago. The wedding is just a few months away, and my parents, in an effort to impress the groom's wealthy family, decided to cover the cost of the wedding venue and decor. I thought it was a foolish decision because Catherine has expensive taste, and there was no way my parents could afford everything she wanted. Still, they committed to it, even though it was beyond their means. As the wedding date approached, my parents realized that Catherine's plans were way out of their budget. They came to me a few days ago to ask for a loan to help cover the expenses. When they asked, I couldn't help but remember what happened when I was preparing for college. My parents had refused to borrow money back then because they said it was against their principles. So, I pointed out that if borrowing money was such a big issue, then it should be now as well. They seemed taken aback, probably because they hadn't expected me to bring up the past. They didn't have much to say in response, and eventually left quietly. Shortly after this, several of my relatives began reaching out to me, saying that I was being petty and that I had humiliated my parents. They claimed that I had changed after becoming successful, and that I was using my money to hold power over my parents, which I believe is a gross misrepresentation of the situation. I refused to back down because I felt it was important to stand up for what I believed was fair. If my parents had an issue with my decision, they should have confronted me directly instead of complaining to other relatives. I wasn't interested in explaining myself further to anyone who couldn't understand my perspective. Besides, I wasn't invited to Catherine's wedding, so I didn't see why I should be expected to contribute financially. 2 days ago, my parents visited me again, this time very upset. They told me that because I refused to help, Catherine had uninvited them from the wedding. Apparently, when they informed her that they couldn't cover all the costs and needed her and her in-laws to contribute, she became furious. She told them that asking her in-laws for money at the stage would embarrass her and our family. I agreed that my parents should have never made such a commitment without being certain they could fulfill it. I reminded them that Catherine's reaction wasn't surprising, given how they raised her, and that this was their responsibility, not mine. While I thought uninviting them from the wedding was an overreaction on Catherine's part, I pointed out that they couldn't expect anything different from her after enabling her behavior for so long. My parents continued to insist that if I had just helped them out, none of this would have happened. However, I refused to take responsibility for the consequences of their poor decisions, and I stood firm in my belief that their principles shouldn't change just because it was now inconvenient for them. If my family hadn't been so focused on petty issues and holding on to grudges from the past, they wouldn't be in this situation now. I found it incredibly unfair that they chose to blame me, so I told them to leave. They did leave, but they continued to harass me afterward, and now the entire family has turned against me, accusing me of being selfish and heartless. Personally, I don't think I've done anything wrong. But anyway, am I in the wrong for refusing to contribute to my sister's wedding because my parents can't afford it? I decided to go no contact with my entire family. It's shocking that not only my mom's side, but also my dad's side of the family have united against me. The only ones on my side are my dad's parents, as my mom's parents are no longer around. My grandparents have tried to keep the peace within the family, but even they are getting exhausted from all this drama. Over the years, there have been plenty of differences among family members, but it seems their shared disdain for me has brought them all together. At least, I can find some humor in the idea that I've managed to unite the family, even if it's through their collective dislike of me. Despite blocking all of them, the situation hasn't died down, and I have no desire for any further drama. One commenter suggested that perhaps the reason the family hates me so much is out of jealousy, and I think that might be a valid point. I don't want to sound arrogant, but I've done much better for myself than most of my family members, and I don't think they can stand it. I never followed anyone's advice while growing up. Most of my family suggested that I should just get a business degree and take over my dad's store because they believed that's where my future lay. Instead, I pursued my interests, which they didn't understand or support, and ironically, that's how I make my living now. I've become more successful than most of my cousins, and I can sense that not only do they envy me, but their parents also resent me. It baffles me because I always thought families should be supportive and happy for each other's successes, sharing that joy. But that has never been the case in my family, and it's disheartening. I suspect my parents are even taking pleasure in the fact that the entire family is against me right now. According to them, I'm the one who got them uninvited from my sister's wedding. We haven't spoken since they last visited me, accusing me of ruining their relationship with my sister, which I still don't fully understand. However, my grandparents have informed me that they are also not on speaking terms with my parents. Knowing that my grandparents support me just shows how ungrateful my parents are, considering how much my grandparents have helped them over the years. They seem to have conveniently forgotten all the help they received. In a way, it makes me glad I didn't help them out when they approached me, because I'm sure they would have taken it for granted and forgotten about it in the future. Yesterday, something unexpected happened. My sister Catherine, whom I haven't spoken to in 5 years, showed up at my house. I was certain she was here to discuss her wedding, especially since our parents are no longer invited, and she might need financial help. However, she was clever enough not to start with that. Instead, she apologized for everything she had done in the past. She said she was about to get married and wanted to extend an invitation to me before anyone else to make up for her past behavior. She admitted that our parents never corrected her behavior, so she thought she was acting normally. But now that she's older, she realized how wrong she had been and wanted to make amends, starting with me since I had put up with her the most. I let her speak, and once she finished, I told her I appreciated her apology, but I suspected there was more to her visit. Sure enough, she eventually explained that after hearing what our parents had been saying about me, she realized I had been right in refusing to contribute to her wedding. She claimed she was here to make things right and asked for my help. Our parents had promised to help her, but since they were no longer invited, they withdrew their support, and she was embarrassed to tell her fiancé. She asked if I could help her just this once, even offering to sign a contract promising to repay me by the end of the year. I found it amusing that she was willing to go to such lengths, but I told her I needed time to think. Even though she apologized, our relationship is still strained. She then accused me of being too difficult and said that as her brother, it was my duty to help her. I knew from the beginning she was only here for the money, and her apology was insincere. I told her she was just like our parents, selfish and always looking out for herself. She became angry, yelling at me, but I stood my ground and told her to leave my house. She threatened to call the cops, but I didn't care. She eventually left, and while I was annoyed at first, I found the whole situation laughable later. A few weeks later, I received an invitation to Catherine's wedding. I was surprised, as I assumed the invitation had been rescinded after our fight. I reached out to her for clarification. She called back and explained that she genuinely meant her apology and had arranged for the wedding funds herself. She also revealed that our parents had not been uninvited. They had withdrawn themselves after a disagreement. Catherine admitted our parents had misrepresented her intentions and blamed her for the fallout, which made her realize their manipulative behavior. It seems she is finally seeing things clearly, and while our relationship is still not perfect, I'm willing to give her a chance. She asked if I wanted to attend her wedding, and I told her I needed time to decide. Repairing a relationship that has been broken for years is not easy, but I don't want to hold on to grudges forever. After discussing it with my grandparents, they agreed that if I decided to attend, they would also go, especially since Catherine seemed to be rethinking her relationships with the rest of the family. Yesterday, I attended Catherine's wedding, but not just as a guest. I walked her down the aisle. Our parents did not apologize or reach out to her before the wedding, so they were not invited. She was very upset, and a few days before the ceremony, she asked if I would walk her down the aisle since she needed emotional support. I agreed, despite everything, because nobody deserves to be abandoned by their parents over a trivial argument. It was hard to see my sister so hurt by their behavior, but I'm glad I was there for her. During the wedding, my grandparents and I supported her. Her fiancé also apologized to me for past behavior, and Catherine explained she had been honest with him about everything. I could tell she was genuinely trying to change. Though it wasn't an ideal situation, it felt like a step in the right direction. We still have a lot to work through, but I'm willing to believe she wants to start fresh. Not everyone might agree with my decision to reconnect, but I believe I'm doing the right thing.